Good morning. My name is Brooke Kiener. I'm the Dean of the School of Continuing Studies at Whitworth University. So of course I have to start with a little shout out to those who are finishing their degree this May. At least two in the room. Anyone else finishing one of our degree programs? And you both are in the MBA, and so congratulations. That's a huge milestone. I'm really, really happy for you. And anyone else out there interested in MBA, we'd be really happy to provide you one. So in the School of Continuing Studies, I oversee our adult degree completion programs. So these are degree programs that are for people who are 24 years of age or older and have at least 2 years of experience as in the working professional world. Some of those folks come to us as transfers right from the community colleges. Some of them have some credit from a first attempt at college and for whatever reason, didn't finish their degree in that typical age range, but are ready to come back and finish that degree now. And then some people just, left high school, didn't want to go to college until 20 years later, and now they want to finish that degree, and so they come to us. So we are tailored specifically for the needs of adult learners who are also full-time employees or running their own businesses, most of whom also have family commitments. We're nights and weekends, largely online, with hybrid options so that there is some interaction. And if you want a fully in-person, you can also be fully in-person in the classroom. So that's what we do at Whitworth. In addition to my work as the Dean of the School of Continuing Studies, I was our Associate Provost for several years, helping with faculty development and student success initiatives. And then before that, I was a theater professor for 11 years. So my background, my undergraduate degree, both my graduate degrees, that's right, for those of you counting, not 1, not 2, but 3 degrees in theater, and you too could be a dean of a School of Continuing Studies. So during the pandemic, I had a little extra time on my hands, and I had always been really interested in coaching, and so I did my coaching certification. I founded Brooke Kiener Coaching, very creative name, I know, for someone who has 3 theater degrees. I specialize in helping emerging leaders sort out what leadership looks like for them, what those leadership competencies are, and what their growth edge is, and how they can develop the sort of inner skills to show up in a leadership role the way they hope and want to show up.
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah, that's it. We're done. No, I'm just kidding. So before we jump in, I usually like to make sure we're all speaking the same language. Great. This is a pretty normal thing for me to do.
Yeah.
So I would like you to define leadership. And just
what even is it?
Yeah, and everybody knows we're here to talk about how we show up as leaders. So I think it's important to talk about what's a leader and what does leadership mean.
Yeah, great. It's a great question, and there's a lot of different definitions out there. I teach a women's leadership certificate at Whitworth, and on the first night, everybody writes down their definition of leadership, and we, kind of compare and contrast, and it's always the same, right? Like everybody has some different way of defining that. So here's how I define that. Here's how I define it for myself, for my team, and for the people that I coach and teach. Leadership is learning to take radical responsibility for the influence and impact that you have in the world. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yeah.
Taking radical responsibility for the influence and impact that you have in the world. So you'll notice that definition does not rely on positional authority. You can choose to take radical responsibility for your influence and impact regardless of your job title, regardless of how many people report to you, regardless of how many rungs there are above you on the ladder. I have women in my leadership class from all different sectors, people who are thinking about going back into the workforce, people who are interested in climbing but haven't yet. And so really that certificate and what I feel really called to help people think about and to do well is not necessarily like, how do I manage a team, right? There's great resources out there. We have one at Whitworth, highly recommend our Managing People certificate as well. But what I'm really interested in is how do you develop the inner strength, the courage, the integrity to take radical responsibility for the influence and impact that you want to have in this world.
That's outstanding. We're going to double back to that.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about, so we framed this as how we show up as leaders. So talk about that. What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Let's dig into that a little bit. And also, by the way, reminder, ask questions. All you have to do is raise your hand, and Heather will give you the microphone, and it won't be weird at all. Go ahead.
It won't be weird at all, we promise.
Yeah.
So we all have a movie that plays in our mind, right? You have a vision. You have a image of what it is that you want to bring into a room as a leader, right? You have a sense of, I want to show up in these ways. Maybe that's based on amazing leaders that you've known, right? Maybe it's based on, you've watched some other leaders do it poorly. And so your vision is about being not that, right? In any case, you can put language to that idea of yourself. I want to show up as someone who is, reliable, as someone who delivers on the promises that they make, who walks the talk, right? Who is who they say they are. I want to show up as someone who is gracious and curious, doesn't throw people under the bus, right? Doesn't climb by smashing others down, right? I want to show up as someone who is present, who's genuinely interested in the customers that they serve, in the people that they work with. I want to show up as someone who affirms the strengths of others, who sees the potential in them and helps them grow, right? So those are just a couple of the ways I want to show up. And I imagine that, I saw some heads nodding, so I imagine some of that resonates for you. And you could probably make your own list, right? Of like, when I think about, I walk into that room, or I'm sitting with that group, or I'm moving throughout my day, this is what I hope I bring, right? I have influence, I have impact. This is what I hope that influence and impact begins with, right? What was the question?
I think you answered it.
Okay, good.
What do you meant by how we show up as leaders?
Yeah. So another way to think about it is like, kind of, what do you want to be known for? But I'm less interested in like, I want to, these accolades or these achievements or these, credits to my name, and more interested in, how did people know you? How did people know you?
Okay. Oh, you gotta wait, Victor.
I enjoy the definition of what you did for leadership. I think it's very unique, and it covers a lot of areas. Sometimes through Spokane Score, which we try to coach and be mentor to businesses, what advice would you give to somebody who says, I need some information on a particular need of a business? But then they said, you give him some information like, do you have a business plan? Which is pretty basic to me.
Yeah.
But maybe not to everyone.
Yeah.
But anyhow, the question is, she says, just tell me about taxes. And then I said, well, do you have no, I don't need a business plan. But I need to know how I can do
Welcome to
my
consulting,
taxes.
Victor, by the way.
Yeah.
To make a long story short, after 3-4 weeks, I called her, and she said, I'm too busy right now. I cannot take your call. I said, okay, well, you call us for mentorship. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, then she called back, and she said, just tell me about taxes. I said, well, could you check within, if you want to know about the business and the tax, could you check with your tax preparer? Mm-hmm. And she says, looks like you cannot help me, so thank you very much for your time. And I thought, well,
ouch.
But I insisted, because as mentors, we have to be patient.
We do.
Patient,
we
have to be.
As mentors, as leaders, yes.
The bottom line of my question is, I said, okay, how am I going to approach this, right? So I called her back, and I gave her specific businesses with tax implications and what she could do.
Yeah.
And then she said, well, look, to tell you the truth, I'm too busy. I have children. I do homeschooling. I have children. I want to start a business, but I'm too busy right now. When they grow up, then I'll probably do something. I said, well, call us back when that occurs. But the definition of the impact, when people are not prepared as leaders or wanted to do something, what is your advice?
That's a great question, yeah. So I would, As I listen to you, Victor, describing that, what it sounds like to me is that there's kind of a fundamental difference in understanding about what the relationship is, right? That there's a person who's looking for tax advice, right? Or for some very specific, like, could you just answer my questions? And you're here to say, I have so much more to offer you, right? If you are wanting to start a business, it's going to be about a lot more than that. And as a mentor, like, I would expect that you would trust me to help you lay out a path that is comprehensive and that's really going to get you to the goals that you want. I have that experience too sometimes where people come for coaching and they're like, I want you to help me determine if I should leave my job. Right? And I'm like, that's a really important question, and like we can absolutely explore that. What else is going on there, right? How did we get to this place, right? And what do you see? How do you want to show up in the world, right? What is your vision? What is your sense of purpose? So sometimes what we are trying to do as mentors, as leaders, as business owners, we're trying to offer something that people don't know yet that they need or that they want. And so I would just encourage you then to think about, like, what is that initial interaction that you have with people in which you earn their trust, right? Make them feel seen and heard, right? I understand you've got kids, you're busy, you're wanting to launch this thing, you think you need some tax advice, right? I get it, that sounds hard, right? Here's what I'm here to offer. Right? My business, my mentorship is not about just putting out quick fires, right? My business plan is about like helping you develop a plan in which there will be fewer fires, right? Or in which you have your own abilities to manage those things. So that's kind of what I heard in your question there, was just a fundamental difference about in what ways do I want to be of service, and the people who are coming to me, what is the service that they think they need, and how can we better align on those things?
It's almost like, so you're going to probably want to talk about this, but you talk about radical impact, but to me it also sounds like setting expectations early and often.
Yes. Huge fan of setting expectations, revisiting those. I really like Patrick Lencioni's triangle. So the book is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I think. And the book is written as like kind of a fable, which kind of annoys me, but I actually really like the triangle.
Not a big fan of the parable stories?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like, okay, I don't need one story. You know what I mean? I need like to see this thing in action for multiple stories. But okay, what I like about the triangle is you start with trust. Everything starts with trust, right? In the example we were just talking about, we have to establish trust. And the next thing you establish are clear expectations. Who is responsible for what? What is the end goal? What are we all rowing towards, right? Once you have clear expectations, you can have accountability, shared accountability. How are we going to talk to each other when someone drops the ball, right? Or when we don't deliver on the thing that we say we're going to deliver on, right? And then at the top of the triangle, you have shared results. So it's really important to me on my teams that we start with those, that we start with trust, we start with agreements, right? As a group, this is what we're about, this is what we're going to commit to. And then we get really clear on what our expectations of each other are. Yeah, so yes, expectations, big fan.
Excellent.
Of communicating about them, yes.
Okay, so talk about radical impact. How did you land on that?
Radical responsibility.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. Absolutely. Why is it radical? What is so radical about responsibility? Okay, I'm going to throw 2 more triangles at you. Today, I didn't realize today was going to be the day of triangles, but it is. Stephen Karpman. I'm also probably going to throw some names at you today. The psychologist who described the drama triangle. Are you familiar with the drama triangle? So dysfunctional relationships tend to occur because we are leaning into 1 or 2 or 3 of these kinds of archetypes: the hero, the villain, the victim, the hero, the villain, the victim. Victims want to, you can also refer to them as the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. So victims, we all know what a victim mentality is. Life is happening to me. I have no control here. And everything that is happening is, I am just at the will of other people and systems and the world. Rescuers or heroes just want to fix things, right? But temporarily, for the most part. Alleviation of temporary pain, not really interested in helping people, kind of like we were talking about with Victor, develop their own skill set to self-manage. Villains or persecutors, blamers. It's everyone else's fault. That person didn't do their job right. How am I expected to do my thing when no one else around me is competent enough to do their thing, right? Okay, so these are the three dysfunctions. Radical responsibility is acknowledging that when you show up, you are a co-creator. You are a participant. You have options about the way that you choose to see yourself and the dynamics of the relationships that you're in, right? So you taking radical responsibility is saying, if there is dysfunction here, in what ways am I contributing to it? In what ways am I a co-creator of how things are not going well, right? It forces you to look internally and to say, there's how I want to show up in the world, and then there's how I'm actually showing up, right? And we want to say, I'm committed to, showing up with integrity. But if you're showing up not with integrity, that's what you're actually committed to, right? So taking radical responsibility is saying, whatever the results I keep getting, my team keeps getting, my organization, my business keeps getting, I have to own that. I have to say that's in some way, shape, or form a result of the way I am showing up as a leader in this situation. Does that help explain the idea of radical responsibility? Sorta. Do you have another question?
Well, I was just wondering why you wouldn't use a word like mindfulness, because radical implies.
Yeah, well, come on.
Because radical implies you're doing something, I don't know, extraordinarily crazy, by definition, radical. Yeah. There's a lot packed in there.
Yeah.
What you really were describing was something that's more mindfulness, self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but.
No, you're absolutely right. I think mindfulness is radical. I think it's rare. I think it takes a lot of commitment, a lot of practice, a lot of self-awareness. And I think it's radical because human beings, we don't like being uncomfortable. We are very quick, we are. I don't know if you know this about yourself. We're very quick to try to alleviate our discomfort. And one of the ways that we do that is we tell ourselves stories about what we think is happening, right? So there's the fact of what happens in our lives, and then there's the fiction that we write around that fact, the meaning that we make from it. And I think it's radical to take the hard look in the mirror and to say, what are the narratives that I'm writing that are becoming true because I'm writing them? Yeah.
I was going to say, I get where Will is coming from.
Yeah.
But I was writing down, when you show up, you are a co-creator and you have options, and options implies choice, and choice implies that you have the ability to maybe think critically. And one thing, unfortunately, I have discovered lately is a lot of people are kind of not good at that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I might have choices, but you just said, we might write a narrative that betrays the truth, which would require some critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
To really see through what's really happening.
Yeah.
That's not a question, but I'm teeing you up, so
I like
fire away.
Yeah. I mean, big fan of critical thinking, big fan. Also, big fan of emotional intelligence, right? Big fan of what I think is also a really important part of mindfulness, which is to say, what am I feeling right now? What am I experiencing? What is my emotional reaction to the thing that's going on right now? There's more of that going on than most of us are aware of. Our nervous systems, our ways of perceiving, and that's happening all the time. We are all the time feeling and experiencing the world in that way, but mostly ignoring it, right? Like mostly not, and I'm not saying like it's all you should pay attention to. I'm not advocating for like navel gazing. That's not what we're about here, right? But in the true sense of like, what I understand mindfulness to be, a sort of like, would you look at that? Oh, there I am again. Interesting, I'm having this experience, right? So it's awareness without judgment. It's noticing without feeling like you need to determine if what you're noticing is good or bad. So yes, I think that there's this sort of emotional awareness and then also some thinking awareness. And being really honest with yourself. Here's the question that I think you can ask yourself when you're trying to take radical responsibility. What is in my control right now and what is not? There are going to be a lot of things that are not within your control, but there's almost always something that's within your control too, even if it's just your mindset, your reaction, how much breath you're taking. Question?
You mentioned affirmations earlier, and as a leader, how do you help affirm people into this mindfulness or awareness, or kind of bring people into that zone, if you will?
Yeah. Well, first you have to role model it. So what I do with my team, you know, I try to practice in front of them a thoughtfulness about, you know, what's going on in the room. Like I will sometimes say to my team, whoa, things just got a little tense there, didn't they? Do you guys feel that?
You just call it right out?
I do, I just call it right out, you know? Other times I'll say a brief word about my own emotional state. I'll say, I'm really struggling with this because I'm afraid. I have some fear around this. That's what's coming up for me right now. So, you know, I need a little more time to process, or maybe it's a theater thing, right? But I just name it. I just say what's happening without going into a big long monologue about my emotions, right? But I just name that primal feeling that I'm having. And then I also sometimes, for my team, recently, a thing happened. A thing happened, as things do, and
talk more about things.
Yeah,
would you please?
Actually, I totally want to talk more about things, right? We human beings are so, I mentioned earlier that we really don't like discomfort, and we have, most people know enough about neuroscience these days, right, to sort of already know this, but like, we scan the environment all the time for threats, all the time. It's how we survive, right? We scan for threats. Most of the time, like, things don't register as like, as like, the sort of life-threatening threats that send you into fight or flight. But fight or flight is like the end of the spectrum of your sympathetic nervous system. It's like, right, you've got all of this before you get to fight or flight. So all sorts of little things happen in your day that sort of ramp up your nervous system response to the world. So things happen. Let's say something happened in my life recently, kind of right about here, right? Like I wasn't quite fight or flight, but I was like, I was sensing a threat to my sense of belonging and to my sense of control, which was very scary for me. And so, you know, I remained professional, but I was, you know, my team knew that I was experiencing this, and they were asking questions, and I was trying to reassure everyone. And then we had a 3 or 4 day weekend, and I did a lot of thinking over that weekend. And I, you know, brought myself back down and came back into a place of, how do I want to show up? I don't want to be showing up frantic, frazzled, afraid. I don't want to be showing up like blaming other people. I don't want to be showing up saying, all of this is happening to us. We don't have any, you know, any control here. And so, what I also discovered is that like the thing I was reacting to, I was reacting because of the way it was done, not because of the thing that was trying to be done. I'm speaking in vagaries here, but vagaries? Vagaries.
You know what? Don't ask me.
I'm speaking vaguely. But so I came back to them and I said, at our team meeting, last week was interesting, wasn't it? Right? Did y'all feel that? Like that was we were all pretty elevated. Here's what I did over the weekend. Here's what I thought about. Here's what I came to. Here's what I realized. And, I can be okay. This is salvageable. We don't have to, what I don't want us to do is to react against this really good idea because we don't like the way it was presented. I think we need to engage with this idea, this possibility, this opportunity. And so let's try to come at that with an openness and a curiosity instead of fear and anger over but are we going to be able to control the way it's done? Are we going to be able to have agency about how this affects our lives and our jobs? Does that kind of help? So I try to role model it for my team. I try to encourage them. In my one-on-ones with my directors, we talk about it. We talk about where's your mindset? We talk about how is your conflict resolution going? Mm-hmm. Are you when you're having friction in the office with other people, are you talking to those people about that friction? Are you, or are you talking behind their back? Don't talk behind their back, talk to them, right? So those are some of the ways I try to bring that mindfulness in.
I don't like anything about what you just said.
I know, because you have to take radical responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking back to how we show up, and you've said this a few times now, but it starts with kind of understanding where you're at emotionally.
Absolutely.
So talk about that. If I've never thought about that, if I've never done that, if I don't know how I'm feeling or how to acknowledge that, where do I start? Where does somebody start with that?
Yeah, so, there are physical signals that your sympathetic nervous system is ramping up. So your heart starts beating faster. You start sweating. Your armpits start stinging.
And I've learned that stress sweat smells different than other stress, other sweat. Not from personal experience, but
stress sweat.
Yeah.
It's like a gross new jelly bean flavor.
There's the meat sweats and then there's stress sweat.
Meat
and
sweats
it's way different.
Stress sweat. Yeah, there's also night sweats, which are not fun at all. Not enjoying those.
Yeah, right? We're starting the day off right. Yeah.
Welcome to stress sweats.
Yeah.
Your body will physically signal you, and a lot of us, when that stuff happens, we just ignore it, right? So, but you can choose to not ignore it. You can choose to see it as the signal that it is, right? So, heart beating faster, sweating, even just your thoughts kind of starting to race. I feel my stomach drop. You know what I mean? That feeling, that sinking feeling in your stomach. So whatever it is, but you're what I try to practice, would you look at that? Interesting, right? I'm pitting out right now, right? Or all of a sudden my stomach hurts, right? Or wow, I'm having a hard time forming a sentence. My thoughts are really scattered. I can't stay with a thought. What's going on there, right? And then you breathe. You gotta breathe, baby. You gotta breathe. Your breath and your heart rate are two autonomic systems that you So most autonomic systems you don't have any control over, but those are the two that they actually do influence each other, and you can actually slow down your breath, and it will slow down your heart rate as well.
Is it important to know where we're at as leaders emotionally, not just with the bad stuff? Mm-hmm. Tell me about.
But with the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about some good things for a minute.
Yeah. Do you love winning?
Yeah.
I love winning. Do you love achieving? I love achieving, right? Even if it's just crossing something off the to-do list. Even if it's just my team and I celebrate small wins, right? It can be anything, right? But I want their attention on the big things, like our enrollment numbers, right? But I also want their attention on the small things, because it's the small things that add up to the big things. So we celebrate small wins. So all of that, when we talk about the sympathetic nervous system, yes, at the top can be fight or flight. At the top can also be exuberance, elation, right? It doesn't have to have negative affect. It can have positive affect as well. So, a little bit of sympathetic nervous response that's positive affect like I just feel good about the job I just did, right? Or I just had a moment of connection with someone and it was exciting to find shared territory, right? Or we just landed the deal, or I just saw how the product that we sell or the service that we sell impacts other people's lives in a really good way, right? Like one of my clients had a win. I celebrate that too. Yeah.
So how do we do that? I mean, so I want to get into the importance. Being a leader doesn't mean being even keel all the time. I think sometimes that's a
great
perception
distinction,
that's put out there in the world, right?
Yeah.
Leaders are steady and,
Right.
you know.
Calm, cool, collected.
Yeah, all the time, right?
No, I'm a hot mess.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is it
Hot mess
okay to
express.
be a hot mess as a leader?
I hope so.
Okay.
I don't know, right? You are a human being. You're gonna have emotional responses to things, right? It's how you manage it. It's how you deal with it. It's what you do when those big emotions come up. Do you make them bigger? Do you blame other people? Do you believe you're a victim? Or do you say, oh, would you look at that? I'm a human being. I'm having this response. I'll give you, would you like one more tool for kind of how I manage that? So I like to think of our threat response system as a smoke detector in your house. Smoke detectors make one noise, one sound, and it's loud and it's obnoxious and it's meant to get your attention. But it's not telling you if the house is on fire or if someone just burnt a piece of toast. It's just telling you that there is a potential danger. So your threat response system makes one loud sound, but it's your job to determine what's the actual threat here. What am I actually afraid is going to happen? You do a little risk assessment, right? And let me give you a hint. Most of the time, it's a threat to your sense of belonging or a threat to your sense of control, a threat to your sense of agency. And so you say, look at that. I'm afraid that people aren't gonna like me. I'm afraid that I'm gonna get this wrong and lose respect or lose status. I'm afraid that I'm not gonna be able to control this, that this is gonna get out of control. And then you say, okay, what's the worst that could happen here? And then what would I do? Worst that could happen, I get fired. Ooh, that's bad, yeah? But then what would you do? Your life almost certainly would not be immediately over, right? You almost certainly would have some kind of positive action that you could take even if you got fired. It happens to people all the time, right? And most of them don't die because of it. So my advice to my clients is get really good at hearing the alarm, the smoke detector, so you can turn it off, because nobody needs that noise, right? And then get really good at doing your own risk assessment. What's the actual risk here? What am I really afraid of? Okay, what would I do if that happened? Oh, look, I have options. I have some agency. And your nervous system starts to calm back down.
Okay, so that's a lot and is great. But for those of us who aren't as good at this or new to this space, where do we start?
Like what's before learning to sort of sense your smoke detector going
like
off?
if we're talking about how we show up as leaders, I feel like that was like the 400 level class of how we show up as leaders, and that's great. But for some people, it might be, hey, where can I start? That's like onboard me in a gentler place as a leader. Can you do?
Can I do that?
Yeah, if possible.
I don't know, man. No,
where can we start if we're talking about skill building? That's my question.
Yeah. Okay. Well. I will acknowledge that in my 18-week, my 3-month leadership course, we save mindfulness for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, see, I wasn't wrong.
I'll acknowledge that. I'll
Okay.
acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think in my head, like, do I want to go over? So what we go over in the first 6 weeks is values definition, which is what do you care most about? What's most important to you? Your strengths. I'm a certified Gallup strengths coach, so everybody takes the strengths assessment and we talk about your top 5. And then your sense of purpose. Who do you want to be of service to? If you take your values, the things you care most about, and your strengths, the things you're really good at, and you point them out towards the world, what are you pointing them towards? What's your purpose? In that idea of taking radical responsibility for the influence and the impact, what is the influence and the impact you want to be having? So that's kind of where we start the process. But immediately what starts coming up is imposter syndrome. I mean, that's the first place everyone kind of goes. Imposter syndrome is your threat response system. It's your inner critic. It's your voice of, what if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not smart enough? What if I'm not capable? Right? And my response to that is, what if you're not? Like, let's actually assess that. What if you're not? Yeah.
That's a fun game to play.
I'm a blast at parties.
I'm just curious if you could put a percentage to how much in this program you teach these, what I would call intuitive soft skills versus something hard and technical.
100% soft skills in my program. Yeah. I mean, maybe the only like technical skill, the middle course is on speaking up. And so we do a little bit of like content around how to tell a story well. But even that course is like 90% soft skills. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like on that point, there's not many, it seems like, technical skills that go in leadership, and maybe what seems like a technical skill, like communication, like how to communicate effectively, how to write an effective email or whatever, is really comes down to soft skill. Like I am recently, for the last year or so, realizing I always thought my emails were really short and to the point. And that brevity was a gift that I was giving, and it turns out I'm just being a jerk in my emails, right? Like that's the way they're
giving
being.
You a gift.
Here's your gift.
Enjoy.
It was one sentence, but there's not, and email's already tricky, right? So even in these, what we think might be a technical skill, it really does come down to like a soft skill assessment, right?
I think that everything we do is going to involve other people. So learning about,
if you want to have like a business, I guess, right?
So understanding people and understanding yourself that is what I feel called to do. In theater, I taught a lot of technical skills, right? But at this point in my career, I think that the need that I see, that sense of purpose again, right? My values, my strengths, what can I point towards, is helping people see themselves more clearly, so that they can take radical responsibility, so they can make choices, so they can have the kind of impact that they want to have and the kind of results that they want to have. If you're looking for like more technical skills around like managing people, we have a certificate in managing people. Some of those topics covered are like how to have a high stakes conversation with someone, right? Whether you're confronting a behavior or giving a performance evaluation or negotiating a raise, but like a high stakes conversation, how do you do that well? How do you build team culture? Like how do you establish kind of what I was talking about earlier, like agreements, expectations, accountability, and how do you encourage and give meaningful praise to people? So we offer that too, but
it's like that thing you see on social media all the time circling around. It's like anybody can be a manager, but not everyone can be a leader kind of thing. And not all leaders are managers, blah, 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 right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think that like, that leadership, in my definition, does not depend on positional authority, right? So you can be a leader at whatever level you're at by cultivating this kind of self-awareness and a willingness to take responsibility for the impact that you're having, right? So as a team member, if you start taking responsibility for the impact you're having, other people, that opens the door for other people to do that as well, right? So now they're following your lead, right? So that's kind of how I see leadership. Managing, I think of as like a toolkit you really need to build. And I do think that there's like soft skills in that toolkit as well as some more technical skills. But management, I think, does not have to be quite as self-reflective as leadership.
So when somebody in the management course says, hey, how do I do this thing about emotional intelligence? You're like, well, we have a certificate for that.
Absolutely we do,
So if talking about understanding where we're at emotionally and our sympathetic nervous system and all that is, by my definition, like a 400 level skill, can I ask a graduate level skill?
Absolutely.
So if I'm a leader and I'm trying to grow other leaders, right, and I'm trying to raise up leaders within my organization, how do I address that with somebody who's not very aware of where they're at emotionally,
Right,
the hot messes in the room, right? How do we approach that and say, hey, because Victor might find himself in that situation, right? As a SCORE mentor,
Totally.
you might go, you're all over the map, and here's what I have to give to you in that moment. Like, how do you have that conversation or approach that?
Well, number one, you have to be invited to give that kind of feedback, right? And so, like in coaching, we always learn your job mostly is to listen and ask good questions. If you want to give feedback to someone, if you want to like give someone advice, your client, you say, may I offer you some feedback?
Yeah, it works the same way in marriage, I've learned.
It does, yes, I know. May I offer you some, no? Okay,
No,
all right,
no.
okay, I'll be over
Excellent.
here, yeah. No, go ahead, Amy, yeah.
As I was reflecting, like what's showing up for me is I think I hear you saying that leadership is kind of this space, examining the space between your intentions and your impact.
Yeah.
And I love that you kind of framed it out that maybe at that onboarding level, you're starting to look at intent. You're examining that really carefully. You're defining that. You're leaning into it. And maybe mindfulness is more examining impact, which is uncomfy. My question is, do you, like what I hear, how that shows up for me is they're all stories. You're talking about narratives and stories. Are there storytelling practices in your experience that have helped like as you either you're transitioning, so storytelling practices for ourselves, or if we're people who grow people, are there storytelling practices we can invite people into that you've seen be really impactful?
Oh, that's such a lovely question. I love being invited to reflect on story. We live and breathe in story. We are constantly telling ourselves a story, right, to make sense of the world. And our first instinct when we interact with each other is to tell little stories, right? Just about our day or about our kids or about our work, our morning, whatever it is, right? Like the human beings do this. It's a way that we connect with each other, and it's a way that we calm ourselves and calm each other down. So storytelling, connection releases oxytocin, right? That kind of love drug. And so, you got that in the notes?
Yep, write that one down, yeah.
So connection happens often because of story, right? Because you tell me a story about your experience, and because I'm a human being and I'm capable of empathy, like if I'm open to receiving that story, right? I start to experience empathy, we start to experience connection, oxytocin is released, our bodies feel good, yeah? So practices of storytelling don't have to be anything other than just that, right? Like inviting the people in your sphere to share with you about their experience, and inviting them to do that by being someone who is also willing to do that, right? When I put my theater hat on, what I would say about good storytelling is beginning, middle, and end, and keep it short, right? Like rambling stories or stories that like give you too much exposition. We just don't have the attention span for that anymore, So if you want to capture someone's attention and if you want to establish connection, tell a story that's true and that is appropriately vulnerable. Keep it simple, keep it short. In our team meetings, we often start with like a get to know you question kind of thing, like an icebreaker kind of question. We just go around the circle and people just tell stories. The other day we were doing like, what were we doing? Something about like your favorite cartoon when you were a kid. And it just brought up little stories. And I know my people better now because of those little stories.
I feel like I'm pretty good at that storytelling piece, like keeping it short.
Yeah.
But what I have learned is that I fudge some of the details to like make it punchier
Absolutely.
or have a better,
Yes.
And I'll tell you, my family, not fans of that. They're like, that's not how it happened at all. And I'm like, but I'm telling a story. The gist is there.
It's good enough.
I
right?
feel like
Yeah.
it's like stand-up comedy. It's like, I'm
Absolutely.
here for the laugh. I'm not
Absolutely.
here to get it right.
No,
Yeah.
no. This is a show. We're putting on a show here, people. Real existence is too boring. We got to punch it up a little.
Well, if you keep it short, if I'm trying to
Right.
get all the details in,
Yes.
it's going to take forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My 11-year-old especially hates it.
Like, that's not what actually happened, Dad.
Yeah, no, he said that in the middle of a story. Sorry, this isn't about me. This is about leadership.
No. I love this, right? He's a literalist. And you're like,
Yes.
it's a metaphor.
Yeah, this is just for connection.
Better if I exaggerate some of these things a little.
Yeah. Or just skip the thing that was really important. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Victor. Oh, hold on. You gotta be patient.
You gotta talk into the mic.
She could throw it, but that wouldn't be great.
No, it is, it's interesting everything that you mentioned. But one thing that I would like to get your feedback is on this. The best way to communicate, obviously, is to interact.
Uh-huh.
It's not I tell you and you listen to me, or
Right.
or you tell me, and
Right.
you have touch on that.
Right.
But in the communication,
Yeah.
like when we are doing mentoring,
Yeah.
we're encouraged to always talk to the individual. Before I send you an email, I like to talk to you,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that will establish certain relationship,
Yes.
that confidence.
Yes.
What is your interpretation between, the communication sometimes, instead of being verbal, through a telephone call or
Yeah.
a Zoom video,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it might
yeah.
be, but when you see the individual and you talk to them, is more effective than emails. Sometimes I have seen emails going back and forth,
Yeah.
and they could have been resolved in a 2-minute conversation. What do you think?
I agree. Yeah.
Instead of this could have been an email, it's more this could have been a phone call.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't hesitate. Someone will send me an email and I'm like, it's too long. I can't get back to you.
Yes.
I'll just pick up the phone and call them. Hope to get them. And if I don't, get back to me, I'll respond to your email via phone, right? Scott, do I call you sometimes? I call you sometimes.
Did you call me earlier this week?
I did. I called Scott earlier this week. Yeah, we had a great conversation.
It definitely went a lot faster and got a lot deeper than if you would have done that via email. So.
There you go. There you
Well,
go.
I think the truth is not very many of us are skilled writers, right?
Sure.
We didn't, creative writing, all those things. And so when there's more than one detail or
Yeah.
more than, one thing happening, it can be tricky to write that. I mean,
Yeah.
in the MBA course, sometimes we're given 4 to 5 pages and I'm like, that's not enough for me
Yeah,
to tell
yeah,
this
yeah.
appropriately.
Right.
So maybe that is a technical skill that we have to address is there is an email that maybe response is better as a phone call.
Yeah.
And how to discern that.
Yeah, I think my 2 priorities in all of my communication, whether verbal or in an email, is clarity and warmth, right? Or kindness. And so, kindness isn't even the right word. I think warmth is probably better. That even if I am having to deliver bad news, I want people to feel like I see their humanness. I see their humanity. Yeah, and I mean, we could get into a good conversation about boundaries and not being a people pleaser and those kinds of things too. But I think good communication for me is clear and warm. Here's this. This popped into my head. I'm not sure which question I'm responding to in the room right now, but I hear you're asking a lot of questions about but what are the practices with my people, with my team. My mantra for the year is tell me more. And I would encourage you to adopt a similar stance or posture when someone comes to you with something. Or if you need to go to them and you're asking them a question and they start to answer it, I would encourage you to use either tell me more or what else. And you can say that as many times as you need to until they have nothing else to share, right? What else? What else? What else? And then the other, if you want to add a coaching question to it, what's the real problem here?
Yeah, that's not always the best. Like that can get sticky.
When?
I don't know. We don't have time for that.
You've got a story. I
No,
can hear it.
I know that that's a question I've tried and have found not always successful. Tell me more is great.
Yeah.
But that follow-up.
What's the real problem
Yeah,
here?
what's the real problem? Especially when somebody's not ready. Yeah, when somebody's not ready to be emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
You know, there is, maybe it isn't.
And this, unfortunately, this will be like the last thing because I want to be mindful of the space.
I'll mention one thing that a kindergarten teacher told me.
Yeah.
She taught kindergarten for 20 years, I think.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, the best coming to communication is be kind, be specific, and be helpful.
And be helpful. Very nice, yeah. Here's what I like about what's the real problem here. Bad problem definition leads to bad solutions.
Bingo.
So, you know, if I hear, if one of my direct reports or one of my staff or a client or someone is kind of describing to me, and I get a sense that like, I hear how you're describing that, but there's something else going on here, right? Or I'm seeing something that I think they're avoiding. You know,
that's why that question can be tricky if they know they're avoiding the thing, right?
So may I give you some feedback?
There you go.
What I'm hearing in your narrative, you know, you're describing this, but I'm also hearing some of this. Is that true for you?
Yeah.
Interesting. Tell me more.
I feel like we might almost need a part 2 with you at some point, especially when you mention boundaries. So on that note, I really do want to be respectful of the space. As I said before we jumped on with our LinkedIn audience, there's a group coming in right after us that's pretty important. So we're going to wind down. I'm so sorry to steal 5 minutes from
it's
you.
Great.
But round of applause for Brooke for joining us. Thank you so much. And Business Brew will be back. I think it's first Thursday of the month in June, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's one of the marketing people with the Spokane Library. So really exciting. So hope to see you next month, and thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Good luck out there.